26. I buried my Amish husband last winter. Then a woman arrived calling him father. The apron would not wring dry. I had been twisting the same wet black cloth over the basin for what felt like a long while, and my knuckles had gone the color of beet skins. Kerosene lamp was still lit, though pale March light already lay across the pine floor. I had forgotten to blow it out. 119 days. That was how long I had worn black since we buried Eli. Then I heard the soft pull of a horse at the end of our lane, and a buggy I did not know stopped at the fence post. A woman stepped down. She wore a plain navy dress, no prayer cap, and she carried a folded paper in her gloved hand. What I am about to tell you, I have never said aloud to anyone in our district. Not in 51 years. My name is Mary, and this is Mary Amish Home, where I sit at the table with you and tell the quiet things, the ones the women in my settlement folded away instead of speaking. If your evenings are long, stay close, and subscribe so the lamp stays lit between us. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight, and whether you, too, ever loved a man whose young years were a closed cupboard. My name is Mary, and this is Mary Amish Home, where I sit at the table and tell the quiet things our women folded away instead of speaking. Subscribe so the lamp stays lit between us. In the comments, tell me where you are listening from tonight, and whether you ever loved a man whose young years stayed a closed cupboard. She did not come to the porch right away. She stood at the fence post with her gloved hand on the rail, looking up the lane the way a person looks at a house they have only ever seen drawn on paper. I watched her through the window above the basin. My hands kept wringing the apron. I could not seem to stop them. The buggy driver, a young Englisher boy by the look of his cap, kept his eyes on the horse. Snow lay in the ditches in gritty gray pieces the way snow does at the end of March, when it is tired of being snow. My breath caught at the second rib, not the throat. Something in me already knew. Something else in me did not yet wish to. She walked up the lane slow. The folded paper stayed in her hand the whole way, and she did not look at it once. The way you do not look at a thing you have carried so long it has become a part of the hand. In our district, in Gordonville, women wear black for mourning, and the dresses run dark, almost a kind of plum at the seams. Her navy was wrong plain but not ours. I opened the door before she knocked because Gelassenheit, the yieldedness our mother stitched into us, does not let a woman stand on a porch in March wind. I let her in. I did not ask her name yet. She sat at the long pine table where Eli had eaten 51 winters of breakfasts. I put the kettle on without thinking. My hands worked the way they always had, lifting the kettle, setting it to the wood stove, taking down the blue mug from the second shelf. The mug was Eli's. I caught it halfway to the table and stood there a moment, holding it, not knowing where to put it down. She watched me. She did not speak. She placed the folded paper on the table between us, square in the center, and laid her gloved hand flat beside it. She did not open the paper. I did not ask. I will tell you something about my Eli. He was baptized late, 24 winters old, when most of the boys in Gordonville knelt at 19 or 20. I remember the bishop's wife at the supper after, murmuring something soft about how the Lord waits for some longer than others. That is what I was told. I do not claim to know the rules of every district, only the home I came from. But late baptism in those years in our place meant a boy had stayed out in the world a season longer than the others. A Rumspringa summer that ran into a Rumspringa winter. The women did not ask. The men did not tell, and I, at 18, did not ask either. If you have ever loved a man whose young years stayed shut to you like a cupboard with no handle, sit a while with me here. You are not the only one. There is room at this table for the both of us. I want you to know that before I go further, because what I tell you next is not a scandal story. It is a slower thing. It is the story of a woman who held a folded paper in her own kitchen and understood, finally. She had been holding it for 51 years without knowing. The kettle began to whistle. Neither of us moved to lift it. The whistle climbed, thin and steady, and still neither of us moved. Her gloved hand stayed flat beside the paper. My hand had drifted, without my permission, to the cedar chest behind me, where Eli's Ausbund, the old hymn book, had sat untouched since the morning of the funeral. I do not remember telling my hand to go there. It went. The whistle filled the kitchen. Finally I rose and lifted the kettle off the stove, and the silence that came after was louder than the whistle had been. She said her name. Only once. I did not repeat it, even inside my head. It was a woman in intercourse, years back, named Sadie Byler. I had not thought of her in a long time. 30 winters ago, a young Englisher woman walked up Sadie's lane with a folded paper in her hand, and Sadie did not open the door. She stood at her window and watched the woman wait, and then watched her go. The district praised Sadie for her firmness. Bishop spoke of her at the next supper. 3 winters later, Sadie took to her bed with what the women called grief, and the men called pneumonia, and she did not rise again. I had always wondered, in the corner of my mind I did not visit, what would have happened if Sadie had opened her door. Now I sat across from my own opening. The stranger lifted her tea. She did not drink. She set it back down on the pine, and the small sound of china on wood was the only sound in the room. Then she spoke, and her voice was lower than I had expected, steadier than mine would have been. "I am not here to take anything from you," she said. "I am here because he wrote to me once when I was 7. My hands, still red from the apron water, folded themselves in my lap without my telling them to. The paper between us stayed folded. Kerosene lamp, forgotten, was still burning in full daylight. The lamp burned on. I could hear the small dry sound of its wick, sound a lamp makes when no one has trimmed it in a day or 2. "He wrote to you when you were 7. I did not say the words out loud. I said them inside, the way a woman says a thing she is trying to fit through a doorway in her chest. He wrote to her. That meant he knew. That meant somewhere, in some drawer of the years I shared with him, he had taken up a pen and set down words to a child who was not mine. And if he knew, then I, in some way I had not yet allowed myself to name, also knew. I asked her how old she was. The asking came out of me before I had decided to ask. 49 come August, she said. She did not look away when she said it. I did the arithmetic at the table. I did it the way I once did it for my granddaughters, adding flower cups out loud so they could hear the numbers settle. 49, plus the years before. Eli, 24 at his baptism. The numbers met in a summer I had heard about, only in fragments over the years, fragments the women dropped and did not pick back up. A barn near Strasburg, an English girl named Ruth who left for Ohio before the first frost. I had heard the name twice in 51 years. I had set it down both times. I will tell you something I have not told anyone. The night before my wedding, alone in my mother's kitchen, I did this arithmetic once. I sat at her table with the lamp low, and I counted the months between what I had been told and what I had not been told, and I came to a number, and I set the number down. I did not pick it up again, not for 51 winters, not until that March morning, with a stranger across my pine table and a folded paper between us. I had done the math already. I had only refused to read the answer. Woman across from me had a name, Hannah. I said it aloud once, soft. It did not break anything. It only settled, the way a stone settles in a stream. Both things are true. I want to say this slowly, because it took me 71 winters to learn it. Eli was a good husband. He carved a cradle for each of our 8 children, sanded the rails until they shone, knelt beside me through 3 lost babies, and did not let go of my hand once. And Eli also had a daughter he wrote to when she was 7, and never again, because the Ordnung asked him to choose, and he chose me and the children we would raise. Both things, at the same table, in the same man. I do not know how to put one down to lift the other. I do not think I am supposed to. What I do know is this. Silence around Eli's young years was not only his silence. It was the district's, and it was mine. A community that asks for full confession before the Lord's Supper, and also a community that quietly agrees not to ask certain questions of certain men. I was not deceived. I was spared. There is a difference between those 2 words, and at 71 I am old enough to say which one was mine. I was the one who did not ask. I was the one who did not speak. I also folded the paper in my own way the night before my wedding, and I carried it folded for 51 years. Tell me, friend, here at this table, in the comments below, have you ever known a thing without letting yourself know it? Sit with me a moment and tell me. After a while, Hannah stood. She did not push the paper toward me, and she did not take it back. She left it on the table, square in the center, where she had set it down. She said she would write if I wished. She said she would not if I did not. She walked back down the lane the way she had come, the navy of her dress dark against the gritty snow, and the young Englisher boy turned the buggy and they went. I stood at the window above the basin and watched until the road was only road again. Then I went to the table and lifted the paper, still folded. I did not open it. I have not opened it yet. I crossed to the cedar chest behind the kitchen door. I had not lifted that lid since the morning of the funeral. The wood smelled the way cedar smells, dry and a little sweet, smell of a thing that has been waiting. I took out Eli's Ausbund, the old hymn book he had carried since his baptism, and I set the folded paper inside the front cover. I closed the book, I closed the chest. The paper is in the house now. It belongs here, the way Eli belonged here. I do not have to read it to know it is mine to keep. If you are a woman who buried a good man last winter, and the spring has brought something to your door you did not order, I will tell you what I learned at my pine table. You do not have to open every paper. You do not have to know every number. You only have to let the thing sit in the house with you where it belongs, and let the lamp stay lit while you decide what kind of knowing you can carry. Some things we read, some things we fold, and place inside the front cover and close the book over them, and that, too, is a way of loving a man you buried. I went back to the basin that evening, after the house was quiet, and I finished wringing out the apron. The water ran clear by then. My knuckles softened. The kerosene lamp I finally blew out, and the small dark room held the both of us, Eli and me, and the folded paper in the cedar chest, the way a house holds a family when the day is done.